I think we've got an issue. I think this bike shouldn't have been called a Scram. Why? Well, this is just the Himalayan, yeah? What has Royal Enfield really changed?
What have they changed? Hardly a few things. Namely,
This bike gets a smaller 19-inch front wheel. And the tank brace is gone. And the headlight seems to have been lowered slightly. Arey, there's no center stand here. And the seat is a single piece unit. Are these really making a difference for it to be called the Scram? Well, technically, at the heart of it, nothing has changed because this is the same 411cc long stroke motor from the Himalayan. It puts out the same 24 PS and 32 Nm, and it's tuned also relatively similar to the Himalayan. What Royal Enfield has changed is the ignition timing to make it slightly peppier. However, we cannot feel that from the saddle. It is not as substantial as we would have expected, or as say what we've experienced between the Meteor and the Classic 350.
we will be testing out just how quicker it is than the Himalayan when we get it for a road test. So make sure you subscribe to our channel for when that video drops.
But having said that, the same engine mannerisms of the Himalayan's motor continue onto the Scram, so it's very easy to pull from say 60 kmph out on the highway in 5th gear. In the city, you have to work it just a little bit, and the gearbox does feel clunky, the clutch is a little heavy. So in that sense, whatever were the good and the bad bits about this motor on the Himalayan, transfer onto the Scram. What's making an impact are the subtle tweaks in ergonomics. Now the seat height has gone down by 5 mm, but more importantly, the controls have been lowered by 60 mm and they are closer to the rider by 20 mm. Now that means that even though this is the same handlebar as the Himalayan, larger riders like me, we are not feeling as constricted on the motorcycle when we have to flick through traffic or when we are going off-roading.
Even the reprofiled seat makes a difference to the experience. You don't quite sink into the saddle. The thicker foam does a pretty good job of cushioning your bottom on long distances, and there's quite a lot of room to move around in the saddle.
Now I don't want to get into the actual physics of it. Well, this bike does feel lighter to steer and easier to manage in everyday riding scenarios. Be it filtering through traffic or dodging that nasty pothole, this actually feels much better than the Himalayan. And that's a good sign, especially for newbie riders who are going to take it off-road. Speaking of off-roading, everything that made this bike so much easier to manage in the city or on the highway all come together here as well, because this bike took everything that we threw in its path. Yes, the front suspension has 10 mm less travel. The ground clearance is down by 20 mm. But that doesn't matter because we took it to some really nasty trails. We jumped this bike and this stood rock firm. I mean, after all, this is a Himalayan. This is a great bike.
While it feels more manageable than the Himalayan for sure, its 194 kilo bulk is quite apparent, especially when you take it through some tricky technical trail sections. And in case you do drop the bike, you better wish you have some large muscles to get it back up on two wheels. Royal Enfield has tinkered with the suspension slightly, giving it a firmer ride. When riding over small bumps or slowing down for rumble strips on the highway, the rider does feel a bit of the bumps. That's because the monoshock doesn't sag as much as the Himalayan, and even the front end has a different suspension tune. So while it doesn't waft over stuff like the Himalayan does, it doesn't also feel jarring or crashy as some of the other adventure or scrambler style motorcycles of its segment. The brakes continue to be a letdown. They simply lacks feel and ferocity. What is a bigger hindrance here is the lack of switchable ABS on this bike. While off-roading, we did feel the need for the aid to be present, and skimping on this front doesn't serve the company well. Lastly, Royal Enfield hasn't been able to deliver on the same build and fitment levels like the more recent products like the Classic and the Interceptor. The poor welds, erratic panel gaps and exposed wires does leave a bit of a bitter aftertaste, especially considering that this bike looks so much cooler than the Himalayan. In this particular red-white combo, it does look smashing, and there are 6 more equally delightful options available. Even the Meteor-inspired offset-mounted console does add that bit of a clean look to the design and is certainly easier to read. The tripper pod on a test bike will be an optional fitment through the MIY program. Given its urban intentions, we just wish Royal Enfield managed to integrate a USB charger on the bike.
Now this bike does undercut the Himalayan because it was meant to be the more affordable, everyday usable version of the Himalayan. Now the exact prices of this bike are in the pinned comments. But because this is such an easy motorcycle and it virtually does everything that the Himalayan does, we feel that if it was called the Himalayan Light or the Himalayan LE, which is light and easy, it would be a better name for this bike. Because this does just that. It's light, it's easy, it's very manageable, and it virtually does 95% of whatever that the Himalayan does. The only thing that it wouldn't do is the really serious hardcore off-roading. And for that, there is something very interesting coming from Royal Enfield next year.
I'ma go so hard, I'ma go so can't stop, won't stop, can't stop, won't stop. Nah, I'ma go so hard, 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 I'ma go so can't stop, won't stop,